I was just reading an article about HTML attributes and how they can be used to do some creative stuff that you might not know about. Let's actually have a look at 7 really cool HTML attributes that you can use for your next coding project, if that's what you're doing. The article itself I found on dev.to, and I'll link it in the description. It was posted by Mariana, and it is 7 really useful HTML attributes that you might not know about. These ones are capable of doing things that you might otherwise be doing manually in JavaScript. Let's take a look at the very first one here called multiple. This one here allows you to do multiple items in an input or a select. Now, it's a Boolean value, and you might be thinking, how does it work? Well, let's take an email address for example. Normally, you could have an input with a single email address, but by using the multiple variable here, you can actually pass in multiple email addresses with maybe commas for example, and it'll eliminate all the white space in those and give you that list when you're submitting the form, which is pretty cool. This can also be extended out to things like file uploads, where an input might be uploading a single file, but by passing the multiple boolean, then you're going to be able to upload multiple files using that single input. I know that I used to achieve the same sort of results by using a bit of JavaScript to create replicas of the inputs, but then it gets really bizarre when you have lots of input names and it can just get confusing all over the place, so this is a much better solution. Let's have a look at our next HTML attribute. This one here is also for file uploads. It's called accept. It's something that you use for an input tag, and when you apply the accept attribute, you pass in a couple of file extensions. These extensions essentially define what types of files that you're looking to upload using this input. Now, this can be useful if you want a person to just upload an image, for example. You can pass in different images like PNG and JPG, and when the person browses their computer, their file explorer will only show them those types of files. But be aware that this is a client-side check. This means that anyone resourceful enough might be able to just put in their own files manually in the backend by editing this code, and you might be unaware, but someone might upload something malicious. So always make sure that whatever you're doing, have some backend checks as well whenever you're doing file uploads like this. The next one here is maybe one that you've heard of before. It's called Contenteditable, and what it allows you to do is edit the HTML of a web page within your browser, sort of like as if it was in a text input, but you get a little bit more access to the actual HTML that's in there, such as making things bold and whatnot. But what we could do is open up our console right now and test it out. And to do this, what I'm going to do is copy this piece of text here and place it directly inside of this p tag. And let's see what happens when we do this. So now that I've done this, you can see that we've got a little bit of a border here, and we can start editing some of the content in this page. Depending on the kind of web app you're creating, you could, for example, have listener events that detect what kind of changes you're making to the DOM, but otherwise, sometimes this can be a little bit complicated, because as soon as you start doing things like this, you can even copy paste images straight into this content, and you might create unexpected results. So be careful when you're using this attribute. Now, this next attribute is for people like me who can't particularly spell well, and maybe we use applications like Grammarly. It's called Spellcheck, and it takes values like true or false, basically like a boolean. But what it does is it works with things that are content editable or inputs, basically showing if there are any spelling errors. Sometimes you want this switched on for when people are writing things like tweets, and other times, if you're writing things like email addresses or passwords, you want this turned off so that it doesn't compromise the kind of input you're trying to get. If we were to, for example, copy this syntax just here above, we can see what this looks like, and we've got the little underlines here wherever we have spelling mistakes, so pretty simple to use. With the rise of so many different types of languages and web pages working internationally, things like Hindi or Chinese or English or Japanese, we really need to be able to translate websites well with things like Google Translate, but there are some things that you might not want to translate directly. This is where this next attribute called translate comes into play. So what you want to do is pass in this attribute with maybe the value of no to prevent Google Translate from automatically translating things like, say, company names or brand names. This will just make your website more accessible internationally. With more and more video content these days on web pages, poster is an attribute you can apply to the video tag. It allows you to display a little bit of a placeholder before the video is fully loaded. Normally, when a video is loaded, it shows the very first frame of that video, but if that video is long or it takes more time to load, it's always useful to have a poster in between so that people actually have something to access and view before they click play on the video. This next attribute is for the A tag, which is probably one that you've never heard of before. The attribute itself is called download, and you place it inside of an A tag. What it does is allow you to download a page or a URL instead of, say, opening it up in another tab or as a clickable link. Now, it seems strange to download a, for example, page, but why would you do this? Well, there's a few reasons. One is maybe someone's doing a PowerPoint presentation and they want to save the content for later. So if that's something your web app is doing, that's always useful. Another is, for example, if you just wanted to print out content, saving it locally and then accessing it for later for printing is also useful too. It depends on the use case, but at least you know it's there so you can use it in the future.